Hi, I'm Brad Chilcott, Executive Director of White Ribbon Australia. I live, work and play on the lands of the Kaurna people, now known as Adelaide. I pay my respect to the elders of the lands that I live on and to all First Nations elders and people of these and other lands as well. It's essential to remember that the privilege many of us enjoy came at great cost to other people, that sovereignty was never ceded and that injustice continues to this day. And as we speak about men's violence and inequality, we know that these are issues that disproportionately impact on First Nations people who experience the ongoing impact of colonisation and discrimination. I want to thank you for taking part in White Ribbon Day this year. It's been a year like no other in so many ways, and I'm particularly thinking of our friends in Victoria who've had to endure this pandemic in a way many of us haven't. I'd also like to acknowledge all of those who've lost a family member or friend due to coronavirus, who've lost work or been impacted by many of the other flow-on effects of the pandemic, including those experiencing family violence and those who work tirelessly in supporting victim survivors in these unique circumstances. I'd also like to thank Communicare for ensuring this movement could continue and for your commitment to a future where women live free from all forms of men's violence and abuse. As I hope you've seen since we've started, we've made a number of strategic changes to the way this movement operates as we seek to mobilise every part of our society towards advancing gender equality and ending men's violence. And one of the key changes is a shift from a focus on raising awareness only to action and advocacy. What I mean is this. Incredible female activists have worked for decades to get gendered violence on the national agenda, to bring family and domestic violence out of the shadows. The White Ribbon campaign, when it arrived in Australia as part of a global movement, supported this work, and governments, workplaces, sporting clubs, community groups, and tens of thousands of individuals began to add their voices, talking publicly about the terror being experienced in Australian homes and the gender inequality in our society that gives space for men's disrespect of women to be excused and passed on from generation to generation. And what has changed over the last decade is this. We're now aware. We know. We know that more than one woman a week is murdered by their current or former male partner. We know that sexual harassment is rife in our workplaces. We know that women don't feel safe doing things that men like me take for granted. We know that police are called out to family violence incidents once every 2 minutes across Australia, and we know that only 20% of incidents are ever reported. We know that gender inequality is structural violence that leads to women being trapped in abusive relationships through financial insecurity, cultural pressures, and men using the power and privilege they were born into to control and to dominate. We also know that the coronavirus pandemic has made things worse. A 75% increase in Google searches for domestic violence, a rising number of women reporting male violence for the first time, and the Chief Justice of the Family Court saying it's the worst it's been in 30 years. There's been increased pressures put on support services and police. It would be easy to blame the claustrophobia of lockdown or the financial pressure or the uncertainty about what the future holds. That's why women are being harmed. That's why men are harming them. However, the reality of the situation is this. Men are spending more time at home and the result has been more violence. So we know. We all know. What is essential now is what we do about it. Of course, we need governments to make sure women's safety services have adequate funding to meet the growing demand. Paid family violence leave should be a universal right. We need more social housing and emergency accommodation. Women need rapid access to financial security when they're leaving abusive relationships. There needs to be reform in the family court system, and corporations and other workplaces need to do much better when it comes to responding to sexual harassment and cultures that disrespect women. But there's something more that's required of each of us. Preventing men's violence against women, stopping it from happening in the first place, will require all of us, all in. Firstly, speaking to my fellow men, It'll take more than awareness, more than a pledge, more than a ribbon, more than an event. Of course, not all of us use violence in our relationships, but every one of us pausing with humility to self-reflect upon hearing these facts would go a long way towards change. When stress levels rise, does my family feel afraid? Am I communicating in a way that shows respect to the people I love? If my partner tried to control my behaviour, who I talk to, what I wear, where I go, like I influence theirs, how would I feel? Take a moment to listen and to learn from the women around you, in your family, in your workplace, in your community. Think about whether you contribute to a culture that privileges the power, ambitions and desires of men above that of women. Secondly, for all of us, I'm putting out a national call to action, asking every one of us to get involved in ending men's violence and abuse, community by community and workplace by workplace. I want all of us to consider our own role in creating change. Men's violence against women is happening in our communities, in our workplaces, and each of us can take action to create safer communities and workplaces for women, free from all forms of men's violence. We know that communities, whether geographic, faith-based, multicultural, sporting or others, best understand the challenges they face and how to engage men and boys in the process of cultural change. You play a key role in being part of the solution in whatever communities you're a part of. Similarly, workers are best placed to identify the opportunities and challenges in their own workplaces and take steps forward towards a culture of true gender equality and increased safety for women. You know what goes on at your work sites. You hear the talk. You see the actions. You experience the way policy and procedures are outworked in real life. You see what can continue to be improved and the change that is possible. And so we're asking that these White Ribbon Day events aren't ends in themselves, but that they're catalysts for action. This year we're asking people to establish community action groups in communities and workplaces across Australia that will continue the work beyond the events. They'll identify opportunities to prevent violence and advance gender equality that will work in their community, in their unique workplace, and to pull their collective commitment, creativity and energy towards meaningful change. White Ribbon Australia will provide the framework, the tools and the support to help community action groups create safer communities and workplaces for women and to continue to translate the achievements of workplace accreditation into a culture of respect and better outcomes for all women in those workplaces. If your event has been registered with us, you have been provided with a guide to start a community action group, and you can register your interest today. You can also find out more at our website, whiteribbon.org.au, and begin the process of starting a community action group in your workplace or community. Men, I want to speak to you specifically. Let's take the lead on preventing violence, smashing misogyny, and being willing to self-reflect and change if change is required. Let's not see workplace accreditation or White Ribbon Day events as tick box exercises and move on. We know, we are aware, we must take responsibility for what happens next. I want to thank everyone who's already shown leadership on this. Those who've signed up as community partners, who've organised events and fundraisers for White Ribbon or your local service providers. Those who've started grassroots initiatives or who've simply supported the people in their lives affected by violence. I want to thank the thousands of people who know how important a safe workplace is and are working towards change in their local communities. I want to thank you for sticking with this movement and maintaining the hope that together we can create a future different to the reality of the harm that is experienced in our homes today. It's not enough to be aware. It's not enough to think it's bad. It's not enough to want it to change. It's not enough to hope someone does something about it. It will take all of us, all in, community by community, workplace by workplace. We can end men's violence against women together. Join us. Stand up, speak out, and most importantly, take action. Start your community action group today, and let's not wait for another White Ribbon Day to come around to remind us of how desperately Australia needs change.